there was some of it. People were saying like King David didn't exist as a historical figure, and then they found a bunch of stuff. I know there's not a lot in the Bible that is verifiable, but that doesn't mean none of it is. So,
sure, we found the Bible was historically accurate in certain parts. In other parts, it was completely incorrect. But that's beside the point. If we found evidence of something that was real and was an indisputable miracle, like, for example, if we had indisputable evidence that Jesus was resurrected and ascended to heaven, like video evidence or something, it would lend more credence to the veracity of the Bible. But there is no evidence of any supernatural claims. No evidence at all. And again, I know this is going to sound like a cop-out, but try to follow it to its logical conclusion. Who's to say Jesus wasn't an alien that was sent here to start a seed of religion in an attempt to control us down the line or something? Jesus being resurrected does not necessarily point to God being real. That's why I said the stars would have to rearrange in front of my eyes to say I wrote the Bible. And it would need to be verified. Because if the stars were literally rearranged before my eyes, and it was verifiably done by God, and then that God proceeds to say that he wrote the Bible, there just isn't much room for a misinterpretation. As I said though, this stuff would have to be rock solid.
Physical evidence, yes. There's not a lot going on there. Because, you're talking 2,000 plus years old for a lot of that stuff. So, of course, the time erodes everything. The second thing is like historical references of people's written words, recordings. So the Gospel of Jesus, I believe, is one of the more significant portions of the Bible because it is the same story 4 times and very much in line with themselves. Where if you look at like Genesis, well, we have one accounting by one person who says this is the way it is. And I'm sure people back when they were writing it weren't thinking about it like, man, I wonder if somebody's going to ask for cross-references later.
This is a really interesting subject. I was hoping I'd have the opportunity to get into it a little bit. The first gospel written was Mark, and that was in about the year 70 CE. Then the books of Matthew and Luke were written long after the book of Mark had already been spread around. They were written to expand the story written in Mark. They were all 3 written under a different ruler than the book of John, which came out long after any of the other 3 were written. You can tell by the writing styles and the things contained in it that it doesn't fit at all with the other 3 books. It's hard to find secular information on this subject, so I don't really want to say much more about it without having more resources on the subject, but Reza Aslan talks about this stuff a lot. Generally, not really a trustworthy guy, but he does have some reliable information when it comes to the history of the Bible. The 4 Gospels were written at totally different times, and with the exception of Matthew and Luke, they all had access to the other books before writing their own versions of the story. It's not like they were all written at the exact same time as soon as Jesus died by different people across different spots in the world.
That's not how, they weren't thinking about that. They didn't have the skeptic culture that we have today. So you have to look at things in context. What can be known? What can be provable? I don't know what there is for unicorns, but I know there are things in the Bible that are legit. You have history, just lineage stuff. Why would you have to argue it, right? Like, why would somebody say, well, Josiah beget Bezanes and all these other, you wouldn't, no one would fake that. Why would you fake it?
The reason it might have been faked in Matthew is because they were really trying to make it seem like Jesus was in a direct line straight down from Abraham. If he wasn't in a direct line from Abraham, he couldn't have been the prophesied Messiah. And as far as the other lineages go, one of which was Abraham's line on back to Noah, maybe they didn't fake it. Writing was still an uncommon technology, and very few people were skilled enough to do it. So everything was passed down through oral traditions. Ever played telephone? There's no telling how correct the lineage was past great-great-grandfathers. I know it sounds like another cop-out answer, but I want you to really consider it from an objective viewpoint, as a skeptic, as best you can.
If you have a claim that's unproven, right, which the Bible is mostly unprovable claims, right, or unfalsifiable, do you just accept them or reject them, right? If you can't know something. If I'm coming to you and I'm your friend and I say, hey, here's this pill, it's a vitamin, it's going to help you. You can't prove that pill is what I say it is. If I'm your enemy and you don't trust me, right, then you think, hey, maybe I'm trying to poison you. So you see, it comes down to motive. Who benefits?
So this really comes down to credibility. When a claim is made, our brains automatically give it a credibility rating. Should we trust this? Should we act on it? With regards to the Bible, I don't see any good reason to trust it. Most of the stuff is 100% false, and what's true has been proven true by extra-biblical sources. And as I mentioned before, no supernatural events have been verified by extra-biblical sources. In fact, many have been disproven.
So what's the point of the Bible? Well, the Old Testament is mostly stories. It's mostly the book of Leviticus is all about rules on how to live, how to think, how to find salvation, how to be right with your Creator. If you look at a lot of the Old Testament kings and stuff, there's moral stories, but there's history in there. So the Old Testament is a lot of history.
Sure, you can look at it as history, but many of the things in the Old Testament have been proven completely wrong. For example, there is no evidence that Moses was a real person, and that's what the entire first 5 books of the Bible are based on. The fact that there's no evidence that Moses was a real person really tears the whole narrative down. There are a lot of examples of that where the Bible makes claims about things as though it's real actual history, and then it's proven wrong. We have pretty decent records from the time that Moses was supposed to have been alive and influencing people. He was supposed to be really high profile in Egypt, and those records exclude him completely. He is nowhere to be found. Plus, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy were supposed to have been written by Moses, right? Well, they talk about Moses' death. He couldn't have written about his own death. He did not write those books. He was not a real person.
The New Testament is the history of our salvation, the history of Jesus and his teachings. So that's kind of guides to live by, because the old system got thrown out with Jesus. That's why we don't sacrifice pigeons and shit. A casual cursing, I don't know what's come with me. Bad Christian.
Bad Christian. Bad. No.
Any religion that's set up to benefit somebody physically in this world is, I immediately think of, what's your motive? What are you trying to get out of it?
Oh, okay, I'm with you. Like, for example, pastors that get donations from church members. Or, of course, the golden example, the Catholic Church, the Vatican, the Pope.
So Muhammad was a general, and he got to conquer all kinds of peoples. And, you know, he basically, I believe he took the Christian books, and he took Cliff Notes versions of them, twisted them around a bit to make control a little bit easier, saying, no, only I can hear God, only me.
Not saying it didn't happen that way. Not really backed up by evidence, but I'm bearing with it. Go on.
Where, so he had a lot of in-worldly benefits. You know, he became the general, he got to marry some 9-year-old because he's a sick pedophile.
I'm still with you so far.
There's a lot of earthly benefits he derived. Contrast this with Jesus, and what did Jesus do? He died. He got tortured for you guys. He got tortured for all of us. He didn't do shit. And he didn't do anything bad. He went around healing people, bringing Lazarus back from the dead. I mean, he went around doing good works.
Of course, you know you have a bias here, right? If you look at it from a Muslim perspective, Jesus wasn't a perfect man. He was just some guy. So of course he pissed some people off. Of course there were things he did that nobody liked. You're comparing Jesus to Muhammad, but you're doing it from a Christian view. You have to take a step back and look at it objectively, using secular, extra-biblical sources. Unfortunately, there is no record of Jesus outside of the Bible, which is not a reliable source of information based on how many claims it has made and how many it got correct. It's universally known to be an inadequate source for historical events.
Now, I know Constantine got in there later, and he messed with the words. Just like they use the word hell.
It's been messed with a whole lot more than that, too. There are some full parts of the Bible that were forgeries, known forgeries.
I believe that using a parental model, you know, I threaten my kids sometimes. And I know it's not the best parenting. I try to lead with good examples and positive reinforcement the best I can. But sometimes I say, you know, put your seatbelt on or you'll die in a car accident, right? It's probably traumatizing him.
No, I do the same thing with my kid.
It's not a good thing to do. But the point is, sometimes you have to do a little bit of threatening to do it. And maybe that's what they were using the term hell for. I think the Bible is not very clear on hell. And I believe there was some edits to it. I think we're all agreed upon that. So
what was changed? What was forged? What is different about it, and how do you know that that is the forgery? What can you trust in the Bible?
But you have to look at like what's the point of it. And I think the Catholic Church did a lot of good in terms of spreading Christianity, but it also did a lot of bad in terms of benefiting the people at the top of the church.
I think you're assuming it's inherently good. What about the stories like mine? I said before that I was disfellowshipped. That comes straight out of the Bible. When the Catholic Church had a stranglehold on society, the original intent behind disfellowshipping, or what they called excommunicating at the time, was that the person that was excommunicated wouldn't be able to buy food, they wouldn't be allowed to go to school, they would just eventually have to wander off into the woods and die. That is what the Catholic Church spread. That doesn't seem very good to me.
And I don't believe that's what church should be. My version of church is people getting together and either worshiping or talking about God. I believe these conversations that we're having here are church, because anytime two people gather in His name,
you bastard! You tricked me!
That's church, and I am gathering here in the name of God, so we are having church right now.
Although I'm not really sure what the term "in the name of God" means, I don't think I'm doing that. But if you want to consider it church, if it's beneficial to you, go for it, buddy.
I don't believe it has anything to do with a building or tax-exempt status or anything like that. I think these are the kind of abominations of what church is supposed to be. The old church was just a bunch of people getting together in people's houses, having meals and worshiping, and then they would go out and spread to other people. So
I agree. The institution of church is an abomination.
But that wasn't church functions. That was individual evangelicism.
And individual evangelicism is fine with me, as long as that evangelicism isn't harming me or anybody else. The problem arises when the result does harm people, in the form of child abuse and terrorism in its worst cases, like the Crusades, or like murdering abortion doctors, and in the form of bringing scientific growth to a halt in its best forms. I've been careful not to strawman you through this whole thing, but please let me know if you feel like I did and I'll address it. If you liked this, you can subscribe to my channel. You can also follow me on Facebook and Twitter. Just click the annotations.